Hey guys, in this video, we're going to start looking at building functionality that will help us to manage our users. Now, up until now, we would have hard-coded one user, we called it admin, and we hard-coded the password. But in reality, we're not going to expect that every time we have a user or when we have multiple users for our application, that the user is going to have to bring up the database and hard-code it and find the hashing version of the password like what we did and manually put those in. That's not the reality. What we want to do is create an interface where the user can click, and preferably the admin user, of course, can click manage users, get a similar management window like we've done for vehicle listing and for rental records, one that lists out all of the users in the database who would want to display their passwords, of course, and allows them to maybe deactivate a user versus adding another user and maybe resetting a password or something like that. So those are the functionalities that we would love to put in. Based on what is on the screen, however, I already modified my main window to have the button manage users, and I already created the new form manage users. So you can pause the video right here and go ahead and add this new menu option and the new form and write the code that would launch the window. You can pause the video, try it yourself, but I'm still going to go through and show you exactly what I did. So in the main window design, I just added a new option, manage users. I didn't put anything underneath it because I want this option to just come up with the, or when clicked rather, come up with the new window to manage the user. So I added that new menu item and then I double clicked it to give us the click event. And then in the click event, I did the usual thing. You could even just look at previous code that we've written. I didn't put in the check to see if the window is open already. So I can put in that check just to make sure that it won't launch twice. All right. So I'm checking if it is open and I'm checking if manage users is open. Then if it is not open, then you can launch. So that way we only get one instance of manage users. I already went through and added the new form, and remember to add a form, you go to Solution Explorer, you right click, you say add, and then you select form, and then you go ahead and add this new form to your project. I called it manage users. If you want to change the name, that's fine, as long as you know what name you used and that the name is relevant. I'm just going to make some cosmetic changes because you can see that the window title I didn't change it. So I'm going to change the text to manage space users so it's more readable, more user-friendly in its appearance. And then on this form, we're going to have pretty much the same thing that we had on the other form. So I'll just go back to manage vehicle listing, that design, or rental records, whichever one, because we want to have the same kind of layout. We have that grid. I can actually remove this refresh button, but just for now, we'll have the label, the refresh button, the grid, and all of the buttons. So I'm just going to copy all of these controls and then go over to my new window, manage users, and paste them. And then expand the window as much as I need to facilitate these new controls. Let me just do that quickly. All right, I rearrange them, and then let me change the text here from manage rental records to manage users. And then because I'm reusing this code, of course, the names, what is presented on each button, one, the text, and then two, the names need to be changed. So this one needs to say add new user instead of record, right? And then I'm going to change the button name from BTN add record to BTN add user. So I'm going to go through and do that for each of the buttons. So let me just do them quickly while on screen. So that's edit record, and then that's going to be BTN edit user. Or you know what, for edit user, I'm actually just going to say reset password. So we're changing this functionality from editing the user to reset, because for the purpose of this function, or this application rather, we just want the admin user to be able to reset a user's password. That's the only editing, quote unquote, that should be able to happen, right? And then I'm going to change delete to deactivate user. So instead of delete user, we're going to do deactivate. And I'll show you exactly how we can facilitate deactivation versus deletion, right? So btn deactivate user. All right. And then now that we changed those out, I can just do my click events. So I'll just double click each button to get those click events. Let me close that window for now. I don't need it. Double click reset password and deactivate user. All right. So now that we've done those cosmetic things to the form, I also want to make some changes to the database table. So I brought up my management studio, SQL Management Studio, logged into my instance, went into my database, which is currental, and then right-clicked my table that said, and chose design, sorry. So now I'm in the design of the users table, and I'm going to do a few modifications. Well, one modification really, and that is to set an active flag. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'll be saying is active. All right. And then based on the naming convention I've been using up until this point, anytime you see is something, that's me saying I want a Boolean. In SQL, Boolean will be bit. So the data type for Boolean here is bit. And then, so this is going to say, is the person active, yes or no? So if it's true, then that person is active. If it's false, the person isn't active. And I will not allow null here either. But then there might be, I'm going to get an error if I try to save while not allowing null. So I'll allow null and save, and then I'll go back and make a modification. The reason for the error would be that I already have a user that does not have any data for this. So if I chose to not allow null, then it would have been a problem, because then I already have a record that has null. So then it would be a data type or constraint mismatch, right? So moving on, I have the user, and I'm going to add another table. So I'm going to right click tables, go to new, go to table. And then this one I'm going to call roles. So I'm going to have ID, and then this is going to be our primary key, which is identity. So it auto increments. And then I'm going to have name, and name is just going to be varchar 50. So name here represents the name of the roles. So when we talk about roles, and let me just save the table, and I'll say roles. So when we talk about roles, it means that what role does this user play in this application? Is this person an admin? Is this person maybe a data entry clerk? Is this person maybe just a supervisor? You know, and then based on the role that they play, we can determine what functionality they have access to or what actions they can complete. All right. So I have users, I have roles, and then I have to have another table that links the two. So I'm going to create another table, and then I'm going to give this one an ID. And then this is going to be the auto incrementing ID. And this is really going to be what we call a linker table, because we're going to do a many to many, meaning many users may have many roles. So I'm going to have a user ID. And then this is going to be int. And then I'm going to have a role ID, which is also int. All right. So this means that any user right now only have admin, and that admin user has an ID of 1. And then let's say I'm going to have 2 roles. I'm going to have admin and I'm going to have user. So you have an admin role and I have a regular user role. Or maybe I can have 3, one for supervisors, whatever the case may be. But the point is that when a user with whatever ID gets assigned, or a record goes into this table rather, with a particular user ID and a particular role ID, that is the association between this particular user and that particular role. All right. So I'm going to save this table and call it user roles. Next, I'm going to have to create a relationship between the user roles table and the other 2 tables. So because I have user ID, that's a foreign key to the users table. So I have to go right click. Sorry, I did that kind of quickly. Let me do it again. I have to right click in the design view, then go to relationships. And then, well, it would have been blank. So I click add. And then I'm going to choose the tables and column specifications, click this ellipsis button over to the right hand side. And then I'm going to say my primary key table is the users table. And I want the ID column from this primary table. And then I want to link it to the foreign key called user ID. So that creates that constraint there. And then I'll do the same thing, just click add, create another one using the ellipsis. And then this one will be for the roles table with the ID connected to the role ID column in the user roles table. Then click OK, click close, and then I can save, and then it will take a while. Then it will make sure that I know that I'm about to modify these three tables. I can click yes. All right, and once those changes are saved, then we can go about putting in some manual changes. So the fact is that the application is yours. You can always create your own management screens for whatever data it is, like we've been doing so far. We've done it for the managing of the car rental records. We've done it for the management of the cars. We can do it for the users. It's up to you to know how granular you want to get with that, because then some people allow you to create your own roles in the back end, well, in the application itself, and then they allow you to assign users to the different roles for yourself, right? So I will show you how to do the assignment, but then using the same principles, if you want, you can allow them to create the roles in the application itself. But for this course, I'm going to just do it manually. So I would love for you, having done it in the application, that's my challenge to you, that you share your code with me. I mean, I would love to see how it is that you accomplished it, and we can, learn together. But for now, I'll just do it manually. So I'll right click on roles, go to edit top 200. Now I know that I only want 2 rows in my application. You might be building your application for a bigger context than mine, but then within this context, I only want an administrator role. So I can have an administrator user or many administrator users, which you want to, of course, be careful with that. And I'm going to have a data entry clerk. Right. As a matter of fact, I'm going to extend this table a bit, and I'm going to put in another column. So I only have name and ID. Let me go back to the design, and I'm going to put in short name. All right. So I'm going to put in short name, and this one will also be in varchar 50. Can be varchar 50. Very similar data types, but whether it's in varchar or varchar, they act very similarly. So it's okay if you had either one. All right, so for roles, let me get back to this. So let me just close this design view, go back to roles, edit top 200. And then for the short names, I'm going to put in like a shortcut name. So literally you have the name administrator, but then the short name could be admin. The short name for data entry clerk could be just clerk. And then maybe you just have view only. So this person wouldn't have any access to actually change data, to actually click add or delete or edit or anything like that. So view only will only be able to click and see the data that is in the grid, right? So I'll just say view. All right, so we have the role names and then we have the short names, and you'll see the relevance of the short names in a few. So those are my roles. All right. And I'm going to do one more manual addition here. So I'm doing these manual additions because we already have the data, and I want to show you how it will work before we start building it out, right? So the user ID here would be the user ID for the existing user, which let me just confirm what that is. So if I select top 1000 rows, then I see my one admin user, and the ID here is 1, and you see is active is null. All right, so the user ID here is 1, and then the role ID for administrator, let me just select top 1000 again, would be 1. So that means in user roles, user ID 1 has role ID 1, and I just changed line to commit that, and so we know that our user role, our admin, is in the user role administrator with the short name admin. Now that we've made those modifications, one more modification, my bad, I skipped that part. I need to let the administrator user know that he is active, right? So I'm just going to right click users, go to edit top 200 rows, and then change is active to 1. right? So 1 or 0 in database, if you say 1, it's true. If you say 0, it's false, right? So it will always say true. So you can write the word true, or you can just assign the value 1 and the bit will automatically know whether it's true or false. All right. So the user, admin user, is active. So let's minimize. All right. And then in our project, we need to update our data context diagram. So I need to go over to my EDMX diagram. And then we see all of the 3 tables that we left here with, but we need to make some modifications. So I didn't make any modifications to these 2. I'm not going to delete those, but the ones I made a modification to, well, the one I made a modification to would be user. So I'm just removing user. So I just clicked it and I press delete on my keyboard. It's confirming. I say, yes, I do want to delete it. And then I'm going to right click and then update model from database, which is then going to prompt me, do you want to add new tables? So I'm just going to click tables. I know I added a few tables just now, and then click finish and then give it some time. And once that operation is done, then you will see your new tables appearing. So I created 2 new tables and made an adjustment to the user table, and you see the relationships that exist. So both user and role are related to the user role table. All right, now that I have the ability to determine what role the user is in, at the time of login, I need to be able to say which role this person is in. So at the time when I confirmed the person, so we know that we have our login form that handles that logic. And as soon as I find it, here's my login form, right? So we know that on the button click event, when we said login, we did that hashing, we computed the hash, and then we went ahead and said, get us the user. Is there the user? And then the user would have said yes or no, right? So when they said yes, right, then we would have called the main window, passing in an instance of the login window, etc. Now we need to extend this functionality because now I need to know what role this user is in. All right. So I already have the user object, right? I already know the user object, but remember that I had said that once you get the user object, or once you get an object from the database, you can actually access the related data directly from this object. So I can actually declare a variable here and say var role, right? Role is equal to, and then I can say user because I just got user here. So, and then if it's in the else, that means the user is not null. So that means that user presumably will have a role, a record in the user role table. So if I say user dot, then you're going to notice that I have access to, my bad. So I broke my own rule. Every time you make an update to your diagram, you should build. So I've skipped that step. So you can see the side effects of this. I'm glad this happened. So when I just type that code, let me just undo and go right back. So when you fail to build or fail to update the diagram and then you're ready to write code, you're going to see that the code may not reflect the changes. So remember that we had added at least one new column to our user table. So that means our user object should have access to that new column at least. So we're still seeing the same 3 columns that we had before we changed the database, before we updated our diagram, all because we didn't build. So what I'm going to do is just comment out this line and then do Control Shift and B and allow the project to rebuild. All right, so our build is completed, and let me just uncomment this line and then Control and Shift after the full stop just to see. And there we go. So we're seeing here ID is active, is active, password, username, and then we're seeing user role. So that is our relationship, right? So remember I said that once something is related to, or a foreign key for a table is in another table, then we can automatically access the list. All right. So for car rental, the rental record is associated with one car, but a car is associated with many records. So if you have a car object, then you can see all of the records that are associated with it. So in this case, we have the user, and we can see all of the roles that this user might have. So it could be a situation where you have multiple roles, you have multiple users, one user can have many roles. That is the situation that we facilitated in our database design. A simpler way to do that could have been to just add a role name to the user, but then that's kind of limiting, because then if you modify the role or you want a new role, then you're going to have to go through every single user with that role and make a modification, right? So if we have that linker table, then it's easier to manage the different roles, the different users, and which role that user might have. But within the context, we only have one role per user. So even though we're facilitating that a user can have multiple roles, in our context in this application, we're only facilitating one role per user. All right. So I can say user dot, and then I'm getting user roles, but I only want the one role that this person has. So I can just say dot, and then use LINQ to get the first or default role that is associated with this user. So first or default. Now I don't need a lambda expression. So up here I use a lambda expression because I had a condition upon which I wanted the first, or I wanted the first record that met this condition. In this situation, I don't have any condition. I just want the first one. So I'm saying, get me the user and the list, quote unquote, list of roles, and get me the first one. Because we know that we only have one role anyway, when we get the first one, then we're getting the one role. All right. So that is a nice quick way to just get the one role that this user has. And this is embodied in the object called role. All right. Now, when we look at role, it is going to be of type user role. So then I can use role and say dot, and I can get the details on the role or the details on the user that this record is associated with. So I can say role dot role, and then I can get the name or the short name. And the reason I created short name is that it would be much easier to check the short name than the name. So name is the nice official title, improving readability, but the short name is what we, the programmers, will be using in the background. All right. So now that I've gotten the role that this user who is about to log in, or who has just logged in, now that I know the role that they have, all right, what I'll be doing is passing let me say that I only want the short name. So I don't want the whole role object. I want the short name. So I'm just going to say var role name is equal to role dot, and then get the table role, and then say dot again, and then get the short name. All right. And then I'm passing this short name into, so short name, I'm passing role name, my bad, not short name. So I'm passing, all right, let me, just because I just confused myself. So let me just be clear. Role short name, right, is equal to role, our role object, which is users role dot role, which is our table, dot the short name column. And then this variable is going to be passed into the main window constructor. So I know I need to modify this constructor. So I'm holding down control, and then I click, it jumps over to that constructor. We know it's this one that we need to modify. So I'm saying that you can also accept a string called role short name. All right. So when we log in and we're launching our main window, we're passing in the login object, and we're also passing in the role short name. So because I'll be using this role all over the place, I'm going to do it similar to how I did the login, but this time I'm going to make it public. So I'm going to say public and string, and then I'm going to give it underscore role name. All right. So my main window is going to have a publicly accessible property called role name, which will allow any window that needs to know what role is the currently logged in person in. Right. So I can just get that, and then I'm going to initialize it. So I'm going to call this role underscore role name is going to have the value of the role short name. All right. So, and then, I mean, this principle can be used anywhere. So it could be that you're going to be passing in maybe user data because you wanted a welcome screen, or, you want some little taskbar at the bottom to say who is logged in. You could have passed that information just the same way. So I could have actually just passed over the entire user object into the main window and then use that data how I needed to. There are so many ways you could have done this, right? But right now I'm just interested in knowing the role of the person, all right? And then we can move along with that. So the person's role, now let's do a simple operation. So let me just show you exactly why we need the role name and what we can restrict. What if anybody who is not admin should not be able to click manage users? And you can just think about it. We have three users. We have three roles. Sorry, we have admin, we have our administrator, we have data entry clerk, and we have view only. Nobody who is not in the administrator role should be able to come and click manage users. It should either not be visible or visible and inactive, right? So the best way to make sure that when the main window loads, we know, one, what role this person is in, and then two, we determine what they can and cannot do, would be to say on load, we want to make these decisions, right? So I'm going to just create a form loading event on the main window. So I just go to properties, go over, and here it is, load. So I'm just going to double click in there, and we have the main window load event. In the main window load event, I'm going to say if role short name is equivalent to, and this is why I said we can use the short name, and sorry, I actually have underscore role name. So role short name is unique to just the constructor, but then the rest of the application knows underscore role name, right? So I'm going to say if underscore role name has the, or is not equal to admin, let me say not equal to admin. So it is not equal to the short name admin. All right, so obviously this wouldn't be so clean if somebody went and updated the short name. That would break it altogether, right? But let's just work with it for now. So if the role name is not equal to admin, then we want to make a decision. The decision we want to make is that the manage users button, and let me just find its correct name. So I just go over to the properties for that button, and I see that the name for this button is manage users toolstrip menu items. I can copy that. Just copy the name. So if the role is not equal to admin, then I want to say this control by its name dot enable is equal to false. All right. So you have properties that allow you to disable it. So remember, we have dot visible also. So if you wanted to hide it, you could say dot visible is false, or you could say dot enable is false, meaning they will see the button, but it's not enabled. They can't click it. They can't interact with it. But let me use the visible because I think that's cleaner. Instead of showing them something that doesn't work, let's just hide it altogether so they would never guess that they could have, or that functionality existed, right? So I'm saying that if the role is not equal to admin, then this is false. All right, so let me click start and let's test that out. All right, so we see that we still see our manage users, and that's because the only user we have is the admin user. So when it got to this if statement, when it was loading, it would have said, is the role admin? If it is, or if it is not admin, sorry, then don't show it. So I'm going to create another user that is not an admin user. So this one, I'm just going to say user. So, and then I'm going to use the same password, and then this is going to give me an error. So let me copy the password first, then say user, password, and is active is true. All right. And then I'm going to try that again. So let me try and log in with this new user. All right. So I'm logging in with user password, click login, and then it said something went wrong. So let us see exactly what our error is. So let me go over to my login code. Let's see if it's something. So it's something on the click event. Let me put a breakpoint here, and let's try that again. And then it gets over to the hashing of the password. That's fine. Let me step through using F11, and then it runs the query where it's saying where if the username is equal to user and the password is equal to the hashed password. Good. Let me step through again. And then it says if the user is equivalent to null, else. Okay, so it moved along. Now we're getting the role. So I suspect that my error might be here. So role came back as null. All right, that's what's wrong. So I added the user and I did not set the record inside of the user roles. Right, and you can see even if you hover over it in debug mode, that the count is 0. So that was the problem. So let me just click continue. And it will, so exception handling is why it didn't break, right? It just said something went wrong, please try again. And then I'm going to go back to my database and I need to add the new user. So my new user is ID3. Let me go to user roles table, edit top 200. And I'm going to say that user with the ID3 has the role ID of 2. Because we know that role ID 1 is admin. So we want it to be anything but admin. So I just added that to the database and I'm going to try and run the application again. Try and click login and I'm going to remove the breakpoint and press F5 for it to continue. And something still went wrong. So clearly we still have an error that we need to fix. So let's try that again. So I'm moving the breakpoint down to the if statement check. All right, so let us try the login operation again. So it's good that we're going through this experience together because I think I may have missed a step, but I don't want to just tell you the answer. Let's see it together. So F11, and then we get the role out. So the role is still null. So it's still telling me that the user role. So let me just make sure it's getting the right user. So when I hover over the user object, I see that the ID is 3. And everything else is good, but then it's still saying 0 for the user roles. All right, so let me stop, come out of debug mode, and let's just recalibrate and see and make sure everything is okay. So I have user roles. I added the user ID 3. So let me just make sure that it was the right user. So user ID 3. And then, sorry, I have some tabs open. All right, so user ID 3 and 2. All right, so let me just do some debugging and let you know what's up. All right, so all I did was stop it and start it and try it again and try and debug, and there was literally no error. So I'll explain what happened then. So user, password, we click login, we're going to hit the breakpoint. I didn't move the breakpoint, but as you can see, user rows is now counting to 1. If I hover over it, it is now saying 1. I literally made no changes. I think what happened is that during runtime, it did not go back to the database every single time. It kind of like took a staged, like a snapshot of the data at the time of the query or at the time of debugging, and it was using that set of data. So even when we made the changes, it didn't reflect in the application at the runtime. So what we've done so far should work. If it doesn't, you can always let me know. But I'm just going to remove this breakpoint and I'm just going to continue because everything should work as how we envisioned it. And then when I press F5 to continue, notice that the menu is not showing manage users. So that's because the role that the person who has logged in, the role associated with them is not admin. So the role is Clark, right? If I had left the debug, the breakpoint, then you'll see that the role short name is still saying Clark, all right? So then that is how. So what we did was we got the role for the person logging in. We transferred that role data over to the main window. And then in the main window, during load, we set up a load time event and we said, when you load, check if it is in admin role. So whatever it is you don't want the non-admin persons to be able to do, if you had 10 menu options and they should only be able to access 2, you can follow the same pattern and just make it not visible. Just, whether you deactivate it or make it not visible, the point is that they can't do it.